Hello, everybody. Today is Monday, November 17th. My name is Miloš Krajšnik, and this is Canuck News. I wanted to touch on there's a story, let's say a bit of a wider story behind all of these mineral extraction projects that are being pushed, facilitated really, so that for the federal government to be able to fast track, mineral plants, an LNG project, a hydroelectric plant up in Nunavut and Iqaluit. And I've been of the opinion, and I think I'm very correct when I say this, especially after reading this article, that this was all fast tracked in order to stall secession or cease secession plans immediately, right? Because there's been a big push by the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and saying, "Hey guys, if you don't want to help us export oil and gas to international markets to give Canada, a leg in the international stage, then whatever, we're going to secede. We're going to use our right to secede, and we're going to go down south. We're going to see if we can join the U.S." Right, and so that was a big. There's a big push going on behind that for a while. And basically ever since Mark Carney came into play, within the first 5 months, what do we see? We saw big pushes immediately. September, they released a couple. They announced a couple. They really announced 4 or 5 just the other day, like last week. And so this is just a big push, obviously, to help Canada diversify in who to export to and all of that. And I touched on it on a previous episode on like what trade links can actually exist with Canada. A ton of them. Like we can export directly into Asia, directly into Europe. There's various ways, through the north to cut sea passages drastically. But the main thing is, I think the main thing was to not have Alberta actually secede from Canada, because if Alberta seceded from Canada, the country would just be a catastrophe, to be honest. The map would look ridiculous, So let's jump into it. This article is titled "Alberta's Smith supportive of new major projects, says pipeline negotiation ongoing." So Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she's on board with Prime Minister Mark Carney's second batch of key major projects picked for potential fast-track approval. Exactly. Smith says she's encouraged that many are resource-based and primed for generating royalties and tax revenue. This is going to be good for the country, she told reporters in Calgary. Carney announced Thursday that the 7 additional energy and infrastructure projects are being referred to his government's major projects office. An initial list of 5 was announced in September. So the additions include, like I mentioned, the nickel mine in Northern Ontario, hydroelectric plant in Iqaluit, transmission line, and an LNG project that are both in northwest British Columbia. 2 mineral mines located in Quebec and New Brunswick are also on this list. Not on this list is a bitumen pipeline that Smith and her government have been advocating for. Her office said that negotiations in Ottawa on a pipeline are ongoing. And so, exactly. They fast-tracked an LNG plant. So now there's not only the one that goes south towards Vancouver, there's a northern LNG pipeline. Aboriginals, First Nations people have, again, apparently no problems with LNG. But when it comes to bitumen, it's an actual project. It's an actual problem. So they aren't happy with the bitumen pipeline. And actually, I asked ChatGPT here, what is bitumen and why is it important? Because I actually didn't know the nuances of the bitumen here. So it's a thick form of crude oil found in Alberta's oil sands, and it's primarily used to produce gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. Upgraded or refined, it can also be used in asphalts. So bitumen is too thick to move easily, so it needs to be diluted and then piped out to refineries or ports. Without pipelines, shipping it by rail is costlier and riskier. Obviously, Alberta needs to needs access to international markets. So most of its oil currently goes to the U.S. If we had pipelines going to the Pacific, it would be cheaper, essentially. Just quite simply. Economic leverage. Alberta sees pipelines as an essential. This is just obvious. So it's basically crude oil that needs to be diluted and refined. And so this is that whole problem that existed in the first episode that I touched on between Alberta, BC, and the federal government. And the First Nations people were actually one of the biggest proponents of this. It's because they're afraid that it's going to create a natural disaster effect. When something is of a strategic importance, their opinions honestly just shouldn't, in my opinion, matter that much. Canada is at a crossroads. The country is in a very difficult spot. The only real good thing that Canada has going for it is that it has extremely low energy costs. Electricity is very cheap. Gasoline is very cheap. And that gives you such an opportunity to do various types of industrial things. Manufacturing, mechanical engineering, all of this could be Canada could be such a booming place for engineers and for production and exports into at least the West, like heavy industrial exports. Because if you have cheap energy, you can produce heavy machinery very competitively. And that's exactly what Germany used to have before the Nord Stream pipeline was sabotaged, before they basically blew up, right? Germany had a pipeline going directly from Russia, natural gas pipeline going directly from Russia directly into northern Germany. They had two of them. They had Nord Stream 1, and then they were building Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 2 stopped at the onset of the conflict in Ukraine. Because of the natural gas pipeline that was going directly into Germany, and energy would have been even cheaper with the second Nord Stream pipeline. Because of the pipeline, Germany's car industry, whole manufacturing base, so it's not just automobiles, but it's the whole metal processing that goes behind it and all of the subproducts that go with it, that was all extremely cheap comparatively to all of the other European countries. And this is why Germany had such an edge in exporting its goods to the rest of the world, because they could produce high quality products at a fraction of the cost. And now they can't. And now energy prices have gone somewhere around, they were similar to what Canada had. They're a little bit more expensive, but it's similar to what Canada has today, to one of the most expensive in Europe. And now all of this whole manufacturing process is dying out. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is the Green Party, led by Annalena Baerbock in Germany, actually closed owning eight nuclear reactors in the country, and so they had to revert to coal because coal is so much cleaner than a nuclear power plant. That's what you get when you vote for the Green Party anywhere in the world. And so that being said, this is why an oil pipeline, they just call it oil to keep the verbiage simpler, creating an oil pipeline connecting the Alberta oil fields to Western Canada, to the Pacific Ocean, where we can export it further. So we can transport it through a pipeline to the Pacific, where we can load it up on a ship and export it further, or even connect the pipeline further, maybe indirectly into Japan, for instance. That's also possible. There are so many ways of transporting oil, but the key is to transport it cheaply. If you have to bus it out, if you have to ship it in trucks, transport costs are usually what stops people or stops industry from being competitive, essentially. And so they want to overhaul all of this, and so down here they kind of talked about here. Where was it? Here we go. BC Premier David Eby, who has publicly sparred with Smith on our government's pipeline pitch to the West Coast, said Thursday he's still frustrated it's being discussed. There's no route, there's no proponent, there's no project. Said Eby, it's a figment of communication persons in mind in Alberta. Why would you not want to do this? Like it makes no sense. Alberta's going to make massive amounts of like export levies from this. Like it's stupid. This is what, and so you have this idiot here just sabotaging like more revenue coming into the province. Anyways, to move on. So the major projects office is going to actually, so they announced that we've taken in this big batch of fast track projects, and now we're going to start accepting more at a more gradual pace. So this is why I think this whole move is extremely political to get Alberta mainly on board. They put in front of the Canadian people, 11 projects right now. We're gonna do these massive infrastructure works, try and diversify away from the U.S. a little bit, but also we have to immediately stop this talk of secession coming from Alberta, and this is what is happening. So we're gonna do this immediately to quiet Alberta down, and then we're gonna start taking on more projects little by little, and that oil pipeline is probably going to be a part of this for a while. And so what he said is basically, and so this is the energy minister. He says Ottawa is ending its practice of announcing several large industrial developments with fanfare on a single day, and now expects its major projects office will take on individual proposals at a more gradual pace. Natural Resources Minister Tom Hodgkins says. Prime Minister Mark Carney on Thursday unveiled the second batch of mining energy infrastructure projects that will be fast-tracked for development, bringing the total number of the new offices studying to 11. So down here, though, it's pretty cool. They have a map of Canada, and all of the projects that have been that have been okay. They've been greenlit. So this is the batch that was announced in September. This is the one that was announced in November, and then we have two down here that are in further development. And so the LNG phase 2 is down here. 8 is the Ksilisim LNG. So we got the two LNG projects going up northern and southern BC. A lot of mines. There's a lot of mines, which is nice to see because Canada, and we talked about this on a previous in a previous episode. A lot of these mines, like the one in BC, the SECESSION mine here, is doing tungsten and morbidium. And these are key proponents in producing dense, like lithium-ion batteries. So if they have the foresight to start, I don't know if they're going to subsidize a company to start their own kind of EV manufacturing of some kind in Canada, using our own natural resources, using our own natural minerals, that would be amazing. That would create so many jobs, especially because the cost of manufacturing is going to be so low that we can actually be competitive, maybe even with like China. And that's key. One of the main reasons why China is cheap for manufacturing outside of the actual labor costs in China, that was one of the major reasons, is that China's been receiving and will now receive even more energy from Russia. So as soon as that pipeline in Russia got blown up from Russia to Germany, Russia made a new agreement with China. Now they built a new one going straight into China. So manufacturing competitiveness. Manufacturing is the real value add in society. We can talk about tech. Tech is cool. That's fine. But to have functioning widgets, have functioning things that you can hold and use and all of that, that's going to propel your society forward. That is all in actual manufacturing. These are proper value add things. These are long form value add industries, right? You have to have cars. those cars need to be manufactured. Whether they're manufactured by a robot or a human, it doesn't really matter. They need to be manufactured and we need to use them. Humans need to use them. The only way you're going to be manufacturing these things competitively globally, even domestically, because it doesn't make sense for you to manufacture something if it's cheaper for you to bring it in from somewhere else, right? There's no point of doing that. No one's going to buy the thing. Is through cheap energy. And Canada has some of the cheapest energy in the world, at least in the West specifically. And this is an actual golden opportunity for the country. And that's why I really like this map, because it really kind of portrays what's going on in the country. I think it can honestly be amplified a little more. What I really like here is this Alto high-speed rail. I don't know too much about it, to be honest, but I've been saying this for a while to all of my friends, is that the craziest thing in the world is that from Windsor here, Southern Ontario, all the way up to Montreal, it's flat. There's like no hills. It's like 1,200 kilometers of flat. And we don't have a high-speed rail connecting quite literally 50% of the country's population. That's insane. That is insane, especially for a G7 country. We have no high-speed rail. China has like 5,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. You can literally crisscross around the country in hours. Like literally, it's like 3 hours to get from one end, from like the north to the south. It's insane. Anyways, I wanted to show you guys this because I thought it was very cool. This is also very very important here. Mark Carney has set a target for the program to attract $500 billion in private capital over 5 years to create jobs as it seeks to redirect the economy from its reliance on the United States. The first tranche of 5 projects announced in September enables $60 billion of investment, and the most recent about $56 billion, he said. With that as the end goal, the question is, how do we get there? And Don, the MPO, are thinking hard about how we do that. We have 2 sorts of categories. We have discrete projects and strategies of national interest. And she's thinking about what's the right mix. And this is exactly it. Once you have these major infrastructure works that are happening, there's going to be outside capital that's going to want to take part in it. Like that pipeline, I'm going to keep using this pipeline just because it's a great example, honestly. The Nord Stream pipeline that went from Russia into Germany, there was Russian companies involved in that, there were German companies involved in that, there was a Swedish company involved in it, there was an Italian company involved in that. Siemens was providing various pumps for the actual pipeline as well. So it's a long chain of value add that was there. There's so much capital from different sides that went into that project. So many people profited from it. And this is one, and it's not just like the profitability that comes from the actual like natural resource that's being shipped, right? It's the actual infrastructure needs to be maintained. You have to order these parts. Someone has to manufacture them. There's upkeep. There's a whole value chain that exists that you lose on if you don't actually build the thing, right? And so this is why this is key. This is how $500 billion comes into the country. It's because people are like, this is sick. I want to actually put my money here because I don't know where to put it else. This seems like it's high profitability. Let's do it. And that's exactly what happens. And so this is just a supporting article, really. Oil and gas companies are falling back in love with Canada, one multi-billion-dollar deal at a time. And so it really touches on this Ovintiv Inc. Quite a bit. It was once known as Encana. It's spent the past decade running away from Calgary. So it was originally aligned in Canada's energy sector. The natural gas giant tapped an American, Doug Suttles, to be its chief executive officer in 2013, and amid a natural gas downturn, he quickly repositioned the company away from its home base and toward U.S. assets. Exactly, because we were too ESG, right? We're too worried about carbon and carbon taxes. This guy was like, bro, Canada is not profitable. What am I doing here? Let's go south, where I'm going to be supported in Texas, and that's exactly what they did. He went to Texas. within a year, Mr. Suttle spent $10 billion exactly on assets in regions like the Eagle Ford shale fields and the oil-rich Permian Basin in Texas. Exactly, 10 billion bucks. Then went on to change the company's name and move its headquarters to Denver. Exactly. Why would you keep the same name? We're doing something completely else. Let's give it a new name. A decade on, and a halving of Ovintiv's share price later, the company is buying back into Canada. In early November, Ovintiv's current CEO, Brendan McCracken, announced the acquisition of Calgary-based New Vista Energy for $3.5 billion, a deal that will add to Ovintiv's existing exposure in the Montney formation that spans the Alberta and British Columbia border. Exactly. And this is exactly how you bring in capital from the US, from Europe. It doesn't really matter. This is how you bring the capital. You make infrastructure projects that are interesting for people with money that are looking for new ways of making more money. And this is exactly what happens. They start coming back, or they start coming in general. And this is how Canada, like for instance, the Toronto Stock Exchange can actually stay strong. We can have an extremely strong base of energy companies across the country. They can be one of our main pillars of having a stable stock exchange. And our commodities markets could be a booming place as well. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Yeah, I'm just gonna move on here. Wait, no, there's something. Over the last decade, there was always a new. So now there. Yeah. I'm gonna read this here. So over the last decade, there was always a new law or ruling that penalized oil and gas, and it scared off a lot of international investors, said Jeremy McCrea, an energy analyst at BMO Nesbitt in Burns in Calgary. He says, lately though, we've seen more operators take an interest in Canadian oil and gas. He added, some of which stems from a federal government that's looking to be more workable with oil and gas industry and more keen to get our product to market there. Exactly. And down here, they take a dump on ESG. He says, at the same time, the Canadian government added regulations and laws that made it harder to expand fossil fuel production, and environment, social, and government's guidelines started to dominate, making it harder for institutional investors to put our money into energy-intensive assets such as Canada's oil sands. Exactly. ESG is crap. No one cares. On the international stage, no one cares. If you're going to keep inhibiting your potential for making actual value-added money to stabilize your own economy, propel your civilization, right? Because we should look at ourselves as a completely separate entity in the West. Canada should be a very special place in the West. We should be different than the US. If we're not, then we might as well just be a part of it. But if we're going to be different, then we should actually be different. And the way you build something special is by using what you have to its fullest extent and capitalizing on it as much as you can. And here's Mark Carney quickly talking about
of nation-building strategies to transform our economies.
The Prime Minister says the transformation is necessary because it's estimated U.S. tariffs and the accompanying uncertainty will cost the Canadian government $50 billion.
SECESSION will become Canada's second largest LNG facility with a capacity to export 12 million tons of LNG every year to new markets.
In addition to that facility, the second round of projects includes a hydroelectric development project in Iqaluit, the Sisson Mine project in New Brunswick, the Crawford Nickel Mine project in northern Ontario, the North Coast Transmission Line in northwestern BC, and the Nouveau Monde
the Sisson Mine, the graphite mine, nickel. These three things you need for the electric vehicle industry. You need them to build a dense electric batteries, just so you guys know. So this is extremely key in everything. The Iqaluit plant, I mean, that's just electricity for the north. But we can capitalize that. We have an actual city in the north. So there's a number of things that we can do. Like, we have the St. Lawrence here.
Graphite mine north of Montreal. All of them at various stages of development. And the head of the Major Projects Office, says her role will be to speed up the process.
So, like, we could be shipping goods from through the St. Lawrence up north. We could use Iqaluit as like a refilling station, something along those lines. We have some kind of infrastructure that exists there that we're just not capitalizing on at all, right? Let's keep going.
Process.
Our job is all about making sure that people get across the line, get everything they need to get built on time and on budget.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the new federal office is part of the problem.
He's created yet another bureaucracy, a new bureaucratic hurdle for miners, oil and gas enterprises, and other resource companies to jump through in order to get anything approved.
This isn't.
I get Pierre a bit. You know, he's leading the biggest opposition party there against the Liberals. The NDP are more or less, they're in cahoots with the NDP is never going to be a partner of the Conservatives, right? All you have in Canada is basically you have the Conservative Party that's kind of conservative. They're like coined earlier, conservative in the name only, but you know they have the name, so they're technically conservative. Everything is really liberal in Canada in terms of politics and economic policies. And so the NDP will always be backing the Liberals. So Pierre, to gain some kind of political capital in these major infrastructure projects that the Conservatives probably would have pushed themselves if he won in the last election, which we all know he didn't. So he has to kind of downplay or badmouth what Mark Carney's doing. That's just the name of the game. Did Mark Carney create another bureaucratic system? Yes, he did. Is it going to do its job? We don't really know. We don't know if it's going to speed things up until the projects actually start moving forward. So we're going to have to wait and see, essentially, if Pierre's suspicions are actually true, or if this is going to create more roadblocks.
Mine has been talked about for years, and New Brunswick's premier wants additional help to ensure its longevity.
We are looking for an offtake agreement, we're looking for a price floor. Those two tools help both attract more investment and secure the value of the resource.
A government source tells CTV News those types of measures were discussed by natural resources ministers from the G7 2 weeks ago in Toronto.
So she wants an off-taker. So they want someone that's already signed an agreement to buy the goods, and they want a price floor so they can measure their profitability, which makes sense. But do you do this by selling your natural resources to an American company, or do you do it by funding a Canadian company to remanufacture this somewhere? I think it should be Canadian manufacturing, and then you sell at least a semi-finished good that would go into a further assembly line, maybe in the US, probably in the US, but it doesn't really matter. The more value add you can add to a market, the more you're actually valued, right? And we're not that valued, basically.
Toronto. Their new production alliance is an effort to prevent China from cornering the market on critical minerals. Omar?
All right, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a play at North America trying to counter China. And I mentioned that we're literally in a geopolitical play right now on we're making trade blocks, and we're trying to use what resources, let's say, the collective West has against this new trade bloc that's being created within the BRICS, mainly Russia, China, and some of these other players. And resources and manufacturing is a part of that. And we can't counter as North America, as, let's say, the collective West. So the European Union and North America, Australia as well, and New Zealand. We can't counter China's manufacturing capabilities if we're not using the natural resources we have, the capital we have. We still have more capital, intellectual and actual, dollar capital than them, but they have a much higher manufacturing capability. So most of the stuff we buy comes from them because we just got lazy. We didn't want to invest in mechanical engineering. We got lazy. We did. And this is what's going on now. Now it's a fight to see who's more industrious. We're going through a we need to go through a reindustrialization, and this whole thing is about trying to push a reindustrialization. Obviously, the U.S. wants the reindustrialization to go on in the U.S. because they're the U.S. and all they care about is the U.S. But us as Canadians, we should care about this as well. We don't need to be the U.S.'s lapdog. We can be an amazing trading partner, absolutely. But we should have our own formidable military. We should have, our own extremely formidable manufacturing base because we have extremely cheap energy. That's rarely comparable around the world. Anyways, jump into this last story, and this is really just to kind of tie it all together. What happens in the stock market when industry gets excited about good moves, about good policies? And I don't want to say what Mark Carney is doing right now is a good policy because it really depends on how this really unfolds. But it's a really good step in it's a good step in the right direction. Obviously, I think he's been forced into it because Alberta's secessionist movement led by Danielle Smith that we kind of talked about at the beginning. But also, I am confident in the fact that behind closed doors, Trump was like, listen, you have to do this. There's no other way around this. Like, you have to start extracting natural minerals. We need to have our own internal manufacturing base that is completely sidelining China as much as possible. And I actually deeply believe this. I believe this is almost exclusively geopolitically a play against China and Russia. Specifically China in manufacturing. Russia's not really a manufacturing threat, really. To be honest, Russia's not really a threat to North America in general at all. They don't really care about North America. They care about Europe because obviously they're European. But as you see, energy stocks rise on major projects enthusiasm while U.S. stock markets were mixed. So Canada's main stock exchange finished higher on Friday amid gains in energy stocks following more major projects announcements while U.S. markets mixed. Basically our stock market went up because industry was excited. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys liked today's episode. I know it was kind of really energy intensive. But I really did my best to try and bring to light a couple important factors at play, kind of moving in the background. Stay informed, guys. Stay curious. And God bless Canada.
This is Canada. Maple syrup and log cabin say, ay, kick your ass all hockey season, ay, Mounties be riding horses, ay, yeah, this is Canada. Moose live up in our zone. We got the best weed ever grown. We got the best bacon ever known. From Toronto to Vancouver, Montreal to Regina. We keep it cool, we keep it chill. In the Great White North, it's real.